who better to ask than power couple Peter and Steph Shilton. Also joining us to discuss the cons of marriage is Professor Stephanie Kunz from the Council of Contemporary Families. She's recently written a book called For Better and Worse, The Problematic Past and Uncertain Future of Marriage. That makes you particularly apt for this. So, Professor Kunz, or can I call you Stephanie? Do you have a preference? Stephanie, okay, Stephanie. So, first of all, do you mind me asking if you yourself are married or have been married?
I am married, yes, and happily so.
Wonderful. So, I mean, I understand the book that you're writing now is also about this subject. Can you tell us a bit more?
Well, yes. People have a lot of myths about what is traditional marriage. For example, the fact that marriage was so much more stable in the past doesn't necessarily mean that it was particularly good. Rates of domestic violence were much higher. Women had far fewer choices. They didn't have much opportunity to leave a bad marriage or to survive even without getting married. So there were things that made marriage more stable that we wouldn't want to reproduce today. But there were other things that made marriage more stable that perhaps we would want to reproduce. In the post-war era, for example, young men could earn enough to support a family on their own. And so that and their wages rose instead of being their wages falling, as they have in most industrial countries recently. And so that made them more optimistic about marriage. But in my mind, I think that we understand that there are a few things happening. One is there are economic and social barriers to getting married in today's insecure, high-paced, turbocharged commercial society. But the other is that we have higher standards for marriage than we had in the past. When a marriage works well today, it works better than anybody in history would ever have dared to dream. And so somehow we have to find policies that don't hector or bully people into getting married or shame them if they don't, but that support people's healthy relationship, making it easier to marry, easier to sustain a marriage, but also easier to raise a child if for some reason you don't get married or you have to leave a bad marriage.
I see. And now, Peter and Steph, you guys, how long have you been married now?
5 years.
5 years, 6 years in December.
Well, there you are. If the man there telling you exactly when it is, he's obviously very, very happy, unless he rehearsed the answer before, just in case that question came up.
Definitely happy, Josh.
That's great. So, you guys, for you, obviously, marriage is the right decision, yes?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We never really not wanted to get married. We wanted to have the day, didn't we, in church, and all the things that go with it, all the build up and making family members happy to get involved, and it was just a great celebration of our love, really.
And I think that also helps with Peter overcoming his, addiction as well, because we had something to aim for. It was a dream for us, and the honeymoon, and it was just a goal for us to get to, wasn't it?
I think it's the memories really of the day. Obviously, we had a white wedding and a nice honeymoon, and not everybody can afford that sort of thing. But obviously, it was very special to us.
And I think our vows were important to each other. We really did mean them. But going back to what you were saying, Stephanie, I don't necessarily quite agree. I think the modern men nowadays are far more romantic from my era. I often see on social media proposals and couples having beautiful weddings on. I think there's a lot more romance about weddings nowadays, and I think the younger generation aren't so. There's not this embarrassment. My son-in-law's whisking our daughter off for a romantic spa for her birthday, and no one bats an eyelid. But unfortunately, I think a few years ago, romance wasn't as good as it is now.
So, I mean, Stephanie, would you? Sorry, what were you saying, Stephanie?
Ways. I think that because marriages are becoming more egalitarian, and that's an important change and a fairly recent change. Men and women are better able to communicate. Men are getting more open about their romantic needs and their wishes, and women are getting more open about the fact that they have interests outside the home in addition to the relationship. And that means that we're beginning to grow together. And to the extent that we can do that, and we have the support systems that allow us to take the time we need. Our standards for marriage are so high that we really need to be better negotiators. We need to be able to spend time with each other in ways that people didn't have to in the past when they had less choice about getting married and staying married. So it's a harder job now, and we need as individuals to take time. We need as a society to make sure that people are not so stressed around time or money that all they can hear from the other is the conflicts. That's what happens when people are under chronic stress. They can only see the bad things that are happening, and they forget to comment on the good things. And I think that's one of the real secrets to a good marriage, is remembering to be grateful for the good things and to tell your partner what it is you are grateful for.
Well, absolutely. Communication and gratitude, the two bedrocks. Stephanie, there's a lot of evidence that there are actually many, many benefits to being married, like living longer. Is there any evidence that just being in a long-term relationship also provides those benefits?
Yes, there is. Because a lot of times people don't get married because there are other things that make them hesitant to marry. Like there's been domestic violence, or there's abuse of alcohol, or something like that. So they don't get married because they have problems. It's not that they have problems because they don't get married. So when we look at those statistics, we find that if a relationship does have very strong benefits, the legal thing is less important than the real, what you said, the gratitude, the cooperation. And you have to remember that when we find that marriage has these benefits for health and long term, a bad marriage does not have that health. A bad marriage has worse outcomes on people's health and even life expectancy, research is finding, than being happily single.
Right. Well, Peter and Steph, that brings us quite nicely into you guys, because, of course, your union, Steph, you really helped Peter to make that partnership. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about the story of what happened, for anybody who doesn't know?
Well, Steph, you go.
Yeah, I mean, Peter proposed to me very early on in the relationship, but obviously because he had a gambling problem, I kept saying to him, until we've dealt with that, I can't get married to you. And a lot of that was because of, I was concerned about my own financial security, and so I was very careful, and I wanted to marry him straight away as soon as he proposed to me. But to me, with our marriage, it had to be, as perfect as we can get it. We work like normal couples do, and we work on our relationship. Yeah. But
I think it doesn't. You need to work at any relationship. Whether you get married or not. And as I said at the beginning, I think marriage, it doesn't mean that it's going to be a success. I think sometimes people do rush into relationships, after a few months or a short period of time, and decide to get married and find out that maybe they're not suited.
Because we waited 5 years.
We waited 5 years, and maybe that's a little bit of experience we both got. But, I think marriage is a celebration of your love. And, I mean, some people can't afford a big wedding, but I think for family members, to be there and celebrate with their spouses or whatever, then it's obviously, a great day all round. And we always look back on it. We've got so many photos of the day and made sure we got a lot of photos. We're always looking back and saying, "Oh, we had a great time, didn't we?" And that's the way we look at it.
I always, when I talk to my wife about this, and maybe Stephanie, you might agree, because it sort of resonates with what Peter and Steph are saying, but to come together and get married, it feels like the way that works best is when both parties are already complete, somewhat.
I think that's
Yes.
completely true. That you can't, marriage is no magic bullet. Marriage is the outcome of two people who could live without each other and are not marrying in order to get rescued, but are marrying because they've made that effort to come together. So I think there's two lessons that I totally agree with you two on that. A, you should not get married thinking that that's going to solve your problems. You solve your problems first. But B, once you do decide to get married, there is a real benefit. And that is that in our society, it's the highest form of commitment that most people can imagine. And it's accorded more respect by relatives and friends. So the marriage then is a way of inviting people in to honor your relationship. I know when my husband and I got married, we made a vow to our friends and family that we were not going to cocoon. We were not going to leave them out. We wanted to continue our independent relationships with them, but that we would hope that they would now take an interest in us, not just as individuals, but as a couple.